Okay. So what I'd like to do is there's so much in the in this parsha. There's so much going on that what I'd like to do is to really focus specifically on to start off with the whole idea that of language, and then we'll see what else, all of speech, and then we'll see what else happens. But the parsha begins in a very strange way, because the parsha tazria, we know, is going to discuss the whole concept of tzarat, of what they translate as leprosy. It's not really leprosy as such. It's a spiritual affliction that manifests itself in a similar way to leprosy. But so the Torah, you would think, would start with that. It's such a fundamental thing, because it's the consequence of inappropriate speech and other things. But the Torah doesn't start with that. What the Torah starts with is the Torah says, it says it starts off with the birth of a child. And the way Chazal explain it is that the whole process of conception of how a male child is born, or a female child is born, and then the concept of bris milah, and the concept of all the status of nida as a consequence of birth that a woman goes through. That's how it starts off. And immediately after that, then the Torah introduces us to this concept of tzarat, of this leprosy. And what you need to try and understand is, what's the connection? How does it work that you have, on the one hand, the birth process, and then all of a sudden it starts speaking about words? So Rabbi Tatz, in his book World Mask, says to us the following, is that the function of speech parallels the function of reproduction. Because in the lower world of the body, the output is offspring. So in kind of like in Hasidic thought, or Kabbalistic thought, there's the upper world of the body and the lower world of the body, which is divided in the midsection. So therefore, that's why Hasidim always wear a gartel, to divide the lower world from the upper world. But the product of the lower world, we understand, is the physical child that comes out. In the higher world, which is the head, the product of the higher world really ultimately is the output of speech and words. And so therefore, in the same way as children are the expression of the body of the parent, so too words are the expression of the mind of the person who is speaking. And so therefore we can immediately see the connection. As Rabbi Tet says, with the body one forms children. With the power of communication, we create talmidim. So I think it's an unbelievable thing, right? That our ability to communicate is not just simply to connect with one another, he says, but rather it's the ability to create talmidim, to create students, people who learn from us. And that's why it says, when it talks about Avram Avinu had the unbelievable capacity and ability. He was an incredibly charismatic man to be able to bring people into the fold of monotheism through his speech, the words that he used. And in actual fact, the Zohar says we have to be so careful with wasting our Torah words. Even teaching a pupil who cannot really learn from that, says the Zohar, is similar to the sin of wasting seed. Because at the end of the day, it's a wasteful spilling of deeply creative energy. And that's what our words are. Our words have the ability to deeply create. And in fact, therefore, we can understand that words really are the basis of creation. And our ability to speak is what makes us into human beings. So right at the beginning of creation, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world, it says that he gave us the Nishmat Chaim, the Ruach Mamalala, as the Targum explains, the ability for us to communicate, the ability for us to speak. And so therefore we need to be careful that creative energy of speech, much like the creative energy of creating a child, is not misused, because if it is, it can be particularly devastating. We know that the most fundamental part of the misuse of our words is what we all call Lashon Hara. Lashon Hara is such a difficult thing. It's easy to do it properly, and it's not so easy not to do it at all. And so we need to try and understand, why is it that Lashon Hara is so powerful? And the Alei Shur, Rav Wolbe, who was one of the great Balei Musar of the last century, and he was really of those of the students of Rav Yisrael Salanta, of the great Balei Musar. So he says the following, which I think is so important for us to understand what Torah is and what words are and how we can use or misuse them. He says we understand that there's a Mishnah in Pirkei Avot in the name of Rabbi Hanania ben Terajon, where he speaks about different people learning Torah. He says if two people are sitting, when two people are sitting and they are learning Torah, then the Shechina, Hashem's presence, vests within them. And he quotes, as the Mishnah quotes Psukim to prove that. And what he says there, what happens, it carries on and says, what happens if there isn't two people? What happens if there's one person? How do we know that if a person learns on his own, then he also has an incredible ability to connect with Torah? And he quotes from Psukim there as well. Comes along the Alei Shur and he says that the Maharal explains when it speaks about two people, Torah, when there are two people and between them they are divrei Torah, Shechina Shruya, that the Shechina vests, he explains where that only exists when two people are learning Torah, as opposed to when one person is learning Torah on his own. Yes, he does get the connection, or she does get the connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but it's a completely different one. You don't have the vesting of the Shechina, of Hashem's presence within them. And he explains, he says, because when two people are sitting, Hare medabrim b'divrei Torah, they are talking divrei Torah, v'zehu Torah shleima, and that's considered to be complete Torah. But when a person is sitting on their own, Hare ein kan dibur, there's no speech, there's no expression of what is being learned. Ki ein lo el mila daber, the person has nobody to speak to. V'ein zo Torah shleima, that's not considered to be Torah shleima. The Shechina only vests, it only sits and into the place where there's complete Torah. Where does the Shechina vest? When there's the speech, the conversation of Torah, that is when the Shechina comes along. And why is that? Because you know what the power of speech is, says the Alei Shur. The power of speech is the ability to machshir lechibur dveikut. It brings things together. The power of speech is that it connects us with one another. We understand that's the whole point of why we try and communicate with each other in order to maintain connection. And he says, therefore, so too, when a person speaks Torah in the way that when we're learning with other people, so that creates chibur, that creates connection. But that only can be when we speak the Torah out. And therefore, he says we can understand the incredible power of Lashon Hara. The power of speech is the thing that gives us the ability to connect, to come close, to really connect and to cleave to one another. When a person speaks Lashon Hara, he uses that thing which HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given us specifically to connect with one another. The period of the Sina. He uses it to create distance, to create separation, and to create hatred. And that's why it says in the Gemara, that when a person speaks Lashon Hara, the Shechina leaves milamata lamaila. It goes from this world, and it leaves to go back to the higher worlds where it's comfortable, where things are there that are not causing period, they're not causing separation. What does it mean that the Shechina vests between two people that are learning Torah? The learning of Torah is the thing that connects us most profoundly with one another. And the Shechina's presence really is the ultimate manifestation of the closeness of two people or three people or a group of people together. That's when the Shechina comes together. And when the world uses the power of speech to create separation, to create hatred, there is no place in this world for the Shechina, because the Shechina wants connection. And through our averas of dibur, the way we speak, the things that we speak about, the people chas v'shalom that we speak about, that's when the Shekhinah leaves from the Jewish people. And really, that is part of the understanding as we are now entering into this time of the mourning period of the Omer, where we know that the reason why the Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva died, 24,000 Talmidim died because Shelon Hagu covered Zeh and Zeh, that they did not show the appropriate cover to one another. There are different explanations of it. But one of them is that what does it mean they didn't show cover for one another? It meant that they didn't show cover to what the other was saying. When one of the Chavrusa would speak and give an idea in Torah, then his Chavrusa would say, it's rubbish, nonsense. Wouldn't in any way find chashivas, importance, value in that which was being said. And because of that, it's in the words that they said and in the response to the word that the Shekhinah said, okay, I don't want any part of this. And if I don't want any part of that, the words of Torah that are being spoken are not words of Torah Shlema, as the Allah should have called it. And because they're not words of Torah Shlema, therefore all of those Talmidim passed away in this terrible plague that affected all of them. And so therefore what we can learn out of that is a number of things, at least at this point in time. Is number one, we have to understand that our words create. They create great things in the same way as our physical intimacy, our physical togetherness creates these beautiful children, beautiful Jewish neshamas. So too, our talking intimacy, the way in which we speak with one another and the way we value each other's words can also create the most incredible space of kedusha, of holiness, of Torah, and of purity. But on the other hand, they can also create the most terrible siluk, the most terrible separation from one another. And so therefore we understand as we go into this process of tazria mitzvah, which is a very difficult two parshas to understand, at least we understand the foundation of our importance of our words, which creates the fact that our words can bring HaKadosh Baruch Hu into this world. And let us all work together and try hard on that. Please God, we'll continue tomorrow. Have a wonderful day. It's great to be back. God bless everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Pleasure. Bye, guys.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Rabbi.